Welcome to the Scottish Paranormal Podcast. I'm your host Chris, and here we'll be delving into the multitude of strange occurrences that happen within Scotland and beyond. You can contact us with your accounts at the Scottish Paranormal Podcast at gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram and Podbean, and you can contact us by either means. Tonight's episode we're discussing a multitude of different phenomena with a family friend. This ranges from UFO sighting to afterlife discussions, ghosts, and also going back to one of my own stories in the house I used to stay in, with the black mass and also a creature in the corner. So I'd just like to get right into it, and I'd like to welcome Jean to the show. Hey, well, welcome to the Scottish Paranormal Podcast.
Hello, Chris.
Right, so if you want to kind of either run through chronologically or whatever you think, I mean, so what kind of got me tied back into talk to you again, with, apart from catching up, which we've just done, I mean, was mainly about after the Andy Swan encounter, and I put the story out there, you got in contact with me about an encounter you'd seen through your back window. I said, but before that, which I just discussed with you there, before that, I was on another podcast with Timothy Renner, and about some of the stuff with the house, and he asked me about it'd be good to get a better description of the thing in the house, and I forgot you're my mum's best pal. I mean, so that was a good opportunity. It was like synchronicity. Basically, you've given me after that, so we'll talk about that story in a wee bit. But
Aye.
If you want to talk about, you want to talk about light first, for example.
Sure. It was really late one night, and there was no clouds in the sky.
It was quite recently as well, though, wasn't it?
It was only maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, if that.
Aye.
And I was walking up the stairs, and as you know, the window is right at the top of the stairs, and I always look out because I can always see like the moon or something like that, or just the stars. But this time I was walking up, there was absolutely nothing, and so I'm standing looking out at the darkness, and there was this one light in the sky. No stars, as I say, because it must have been cloudy, right? And I thought, oh, it must be an aeroplane, because as you know, we're on the flight path for Edinburgh Airport.
Yeah.
But it wasn't moving. So I kept watching it for some reason. I was drawn to it.
What type of colour was it?
Pure white.
Just pure white.
Brilliant white. So unlike the aeroplanes where you'll maybe see an undercarriage, a red light or something like that, flashing, none of that. And all of a sudden, right, and it was quite phenomenal, the thing started to move. Now I've no idea how high it was, how far away it was, and it started to move in such a way that it proved to me that it was not an aeroplane. It was a zigzag fashion, but it was the pace that it was flying at that caught my attention. And I woke up John as well, and I said, come and have a look at this. And even he was mesmerised by it.
What kind of time of night was it?
I'd say maybe it was about 12 at night.
Aye.
12 midnight, something like that. And I continued to watch it, but it was the way it was going like this, zigzag.
Okay, so if you're looking out towards Whitburn,
aye,
for here, so you're
yep.
So above Whitburn, area, like Barville area, Whitburn area,
yep.
And when you're saying it was zigzag and flying like across a kind of zigzag kind of motion, was it flying like at quite a large distance, would you say, or was it a short distance in between when it was zigzagging?
I'd say, see, depending on how close
far it was,
right, I'd say that, but in my vision, it was like maybe about 50 feet.
Right.
And then down 50 feet, up 50 feet, back down, things like that. And didn't last for very long, maybe 3 or 4 minutes.
Still long, huh?
And then, out of sight.
It's interesting as well, where you've got that bit up there, right? When I was talking to Andrew Swan, and he'd seen a few things up there as well. And unbeknown to you, where he was talking about, he had the sighting of the Black Triangle thing back in '94, which is, if you're up that area, it's relatively, it's just about another mile along that road, right? But recently as well, he said he'd seen a few things in that same area, and he was talking about, obviously, he knows what planes look like, they stay in the flight path. I mean, we're no crazy enough to think it's something else when it's a plane, because he knows what planes look like.
Exactly. And I see a lot of aeroplanes.
Aye, he said the same. They said when he'd seen like I'm sure it was like a white orb type thing in the sky, and it had lights going in about it as well. And there's been a few other kind of sightings, but unbeknown to you, that's that exact same area. Because he's up there now as well, so it's like just there. That's the same type of area, but totally interesting. All that, you know,
it really blew me to bits.
Aye.
You know, it was something that I'd never seen before.
I'd only seen one time. I've relayed this in a lot of podcasts before, but I'd only seen one thing before when I was looking at. We seen like a satellite, and it was coming towards another satellite, and we were away fishing at the Lily Loch, and I'm sure it was maybe me that said, or somebody said, so I wonder what it's going to do when it hits that star, just for a joke. And it came to the star and it just done a 90-degree turn. It was like
really?
That. Aye, totally mad.
Somebody had said to me just the other day when I was telling this story, and they said, well, could it not have been a drone?
Not that time of night, no.
Not that time of night, and it was, something was telling me this was something unusual.
Aye. No, that's quite mad. That is. And John came out, he got up and see it as well?
He did, aye.
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 No, that's mad. I mean, it really is. What about, so I'll touch on a wee bit about the house, because it's across the road, and then we can touch on some of your own stories and stuff as well.
Right.
But what kind of interests me, we gone back to the story where, and it was always like one of the stories that I thought it was a crazy story for the fact I knew my mum and dad, and I knew they weren't up for like just fabricating stuff or whatever. They were quite sensible, right?
Aye, absolutely.
And my dad was probably a bit of a skeptic.
Aye, very much so.
And so the story intrigued me that much as well, because the fact that I knew it happened. Although I didn't see the thing, I knew it happened. And I knew staying in the house that a lot of kind of other stuff happened in the house. And that's what made it, I think, more a crazy story, and more kind of, for me, plausible the fact that it was mum and dad. But the other stuff that happened, and apart from that, we'll get to the bit about, obviously you knew about the story my mum had relayed it and stuff, and the psychic and that, but going back to years ago, stuff that happened in the house as well, things where we thought we had a prowler. You know, can you remember my mum would tell you stuff like that?
I do.
Aye.
The door handle.
The door handle used to go all the time, and things like that, and we had, to the point, I couldn't mind even opening the door when I was younger, quite quick, because you kind of built up enough courage, because it had been happening that long. It happened quite a lot. My mum phoned the police a few times.
Yeah.
But out of our back garden, you had like a big high hedge down one side, it was gated, and on the other side you had maybe like a 4 or 5 foot fence around, and you couldn't get away that quick.
Yeah, that's right.
You couldn't get away that quick, so that was happening. That would happen. That definitely, I can remember that kind of going on. I can mind of the handle on. I can mind even the noise of the handle, because it was like one of the right heavy, spring-loaded ones, where you can actually, if you turned it, you can hear the spring going in it, and it wasn't like a kind of a knob one. It was like a normal kind of handle, but it was like quite a new one in the door. So I knew all that was kind of going on, and when I was starting to kind of tie back in with like Saoirse and talk about some stuff, and she said she was younger, she'd been, when she was 15, she would grab from behind, something grabbed her in the house as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And she sat outside on the doorstep, like basically until my mum came home. And my mum relayed to her that it did happen to her a few times as well, and stuff. So all that kind of stuff going on. Apart from getting to the black thing, did my mum ever relay any other kind of stories to you about the house before that, apart from like the prowler and all that kind of stuff?
No, that I can remember, but my memory is nowhere near as good as what it used to be. I've got ME, and it does affect your memory. Like, but I remember your mum was always aware something going on that wasn't right.
Aye. It was. I mean, it was a kind of weird feeling at the house, and the funny thing after it, where I contacted my neighbour who stayed next door, and I'd said to him, I said, did it ever happen to you in your house? Because my mum had seen, the time when my dad did the black thing, it seemed like a black shape type thing, and it either kind of appeared in front there, or came out the floor and then disappeared into the adjacent wall, right?
Right.
And so that happened, and one of my mates had contacted me after the podcast, said there was one night we were in the living room and it happened to us. There was like a door opened at one of the cabinets, and this black thing went and moved away to the side. I couldn't remember that, but he said no, it definitely happened. He was, I could mind it. He contacted me after the story and talked about it. And I asked my mate next door, who used to stay next door, and I said to him, he asked his sisters, and he said, no, nothing that we know happened in our house, because it was a semi-detached house. He said, nothing happened where we stayed. He said, but there was a thing going back when, in one of the other properties we stayed in, there was like some black thing standing at the bottom of the bed one night, or something her sister could remember relaying. So it's just mad. I mean, that's what I was saying in one of the last ones as well, where do people see these things quite a lot and then just keep it to themselves and all that kind of stuff and all that?
Well, it sounds far-fetched, doesn't it?
Oh, totally,
you don't want people to think you're crazy or you're making it up. But these things do happen a lot.
Totally. Really. What I can remember most about the story, right? For me, remembering a bit of the story, what I can remember of my mum, my sisters, was the basic coming in and mum and dad looking for something, and they were looking for something in the living room. And what had transpired was basically they were having a bit of an argument, and this black thing came in, ruined my dad's legs, and disappeared behind the couch. But you knew a wee bit about it, and if you want to kind of relay a bit of the story after that, so
it goes back a long time, and your mum and I and another two of us went to a psychic fair in Paisley, and my friend Martha and I both got a reading done. Your mum didn't, but she had organised with the medium to come to the house. And you know how you still have them, like house parties where everybody comes along and gets a reading, right? So the day came for that. Now I'd already had a reading, so I didn't go across. And to be quite honest, I never ever felt comfortable in your house. I don't know why that was, but then I realised after this thing happened that was the cause for it. Your mum used to always come out here for a cup of tea and a blether. You know, it didn't always work the other way around, and I was quite happy about that. So, your mum told me that she was standing at the gate looking for the medium coming. And there was when the medium arrived at the gate, she went, oh dear, I don't like this. And she pointed to that, you know, there was a round tree at one
two round trees at the front.
At the front, eh? And
two big round trees.
They were huge. But they were subsequently cut down eventually, right? And at the moment, you can see the telltale signs that there was something there, right? And the medium did not like this one bit. So in they went, a lot of people got readings done, and then your mum's turn came, right? And she said that there was something dark going on in this house. She said, and she gave your mum messages, right? Which I don't really want to disclose. Although you can cut it out if you didn't want it to be broadcasted, right? She told your mum that your dad was a long distance lorry driver, right? He would leave here on a Monday and come back on a Friday, which was true. And she said, but what you don't know is, she said, your husband's been having an affair, a long-term affair with a woman in England somewhere, right? So your mum was waiting on your dad coming back, obviously.
So when do you reckon this was? Was it if he was away, he probably away at this point, was it like midweek or something?
Aye, it was. And when he came in and that, he had his dinner and one thing and another, and then they were sitting on the couch, and Brandy and Simon, the two cats, they were out. They were sitting on the windowsill, right? And all of a sudden, when your mammy started talking and explaining what the medium had said, your dad was in defence, and all of a sudden this black thing appeared. And she said it was like an animal, right? And she said it just flew absolutely a phenomenal pace, went right round the couch, right in front of them, back round the couch, and then just vanished. Now your dad, being a total skeptic, he got taken aback by this, right? For some reason, they moved into the dining room, and standing in the corner, your dad saw this as well, there was like a wee man, maybe about 2.5 foot tall, human-ish, grotesque, giving off this absolutely smell, a stench, and it was evil. And the look on this wee thing's face was evil. So much so that your dad confessed to everything that what had happened. The medium didn't know anything about this because she was long gone.
Aye.
You know, that kind of thing.
If that was midweek, then it probably would have been like the Friday night. Or
it was the Friday night, in fact. Aye. So your mum, she was taken aback, but it was a case of well, where do we go from here? But they couldn't get out of the things that had happened.
Aye.
And this wee man, and I can remember talking to somebody.
So did they say this thing disappeared or what? Or?
It did disappear, right? And I can remember talking to somebody who done tarot cards and things like that, and I was telling her the story, right? And she was quite knowledgeable on these kind of things.
Yeah.
And she said that she said that sounds like wrath, and wrath is like connected to the devil, and he was there for no good. The medium had said though that there was a terrible dark atmosphere while she was in the house, but she couldn't put her finger on exactly what it was, and she would have no idea what was going to manifest.
It always had a kind of atmosphere to it, and I could mind that you'd always get the cats and the dog in the house would see stuff. They would see stuff in the living room that you couldn't see. Animals
are definitely more spiritually aware than what we are.
Totally.
You didn't have any barriers, you know, where it stops us from seeing certain things. So that would not surprise me.
I always found it hard to sleep at night as well. I couldn't sleep with the light off and that. And didn't get wrong, the light got turned off now and again and whatever. But I was quite old until I slept with the light off. No, I can't sleep with the light on. But I mean, at the time, it was. I don't know what it was. It's no saying never happened in that house. That I mean, in my room or anything like that. But I just had this kind of fear of the dark in it.
That's understandable.
Which is, I mean, but the whole thing with that and seeing that thing, I mean, I can mind of the story, and I can mind that the bit my mum told me about the story as well was mainly about the thing in the living room, and saying that like my dad just kept saying it didn't have a head. It didn't have a head. Like thinking it was like something, but the dog was in the kitchen, the cats were outside. This thing wasn't it wasn't like a dog or a cat or nothing like that. I mean, but absolutely, it's like it's quite a mad story, and it's like even if you've seen that, how could you possibly tell somebody that?
Exactly.
You couldn't.
You could only tell that to somebody who was like-minded, who was into that kind of thing.
I wonder what my dad would have thought of it, because of him being a pretty much a sceptic, being in the army and all that kind of stuff and whatever. And I can imagine he would have never told another soul about that.
No, I doubt very much if he did.
Aye. But aye, so totally interesting. And I mean, I can remember we didn't stay in that house much long after that. They split up pretty quick.
Right,
we moved.
That's right.
My mum never took in, never took the house, never took in, and we moved away from that. But
That's right.
with that as well, we're looking into the whole stuff where the rowan trees. So you had two quite big rowan trees at the front, right? And with another like big rowan tree right at the back in a triangle. So you had two at the front, and then one in the back which ran right through that room. And one of the things I was looking into in like Celtic mythology and stuff was like the rowan trees were there to protect against evil. That's what they're put in, right? Or one of the other kind of key things they say was protect against evil, or there's different interpretations here. But one of the ones were protect against evil and changelings. That was another thing, right? For some reason. And but these two trees at the front and then the one at the back that's kind of ran through where the dining room was. And I don't know if they were put in there for protection. I know most people put them up in the past because it was like protecting your house. You go there, some people done put holly at the front gates of the house for protection. And the ribbon was another one as well. But the size of the trees, I was talking to one of my mates who's got a garden centre, and he was saying for the size of these trees, they must have been there a long time, for the point where like when the house was maybe built or whatever, because like if you look at a 25-year-old rowan tree, it's still got like the diameter is maybe it's not that big. I mean they take ages to grow. So I could mind like climbing in the trees quite high up when I was younger, which you look at most rowan trees when you see them, they'll know that you don't hardly ever see a big rowan tree. They were massive trees. And then they're probably a lot bigger, I mean, to me then, but they were big for even like at my age. I could mind being like 10-year-old and like climbing up it and stuff like that. But now they're done.
If I mind rightly, it was the medium that suggested that they got cut.
Was it? I wonder why that was.
But she didn't like them. Right, so you're talking
about... There's different interpretations here as well.
There is, but you were talking about a triangle.
Aye.
Them. So it could maybe have been something to do with a triangle.
Maybe.
Whatever that means, and it does mean something, but I don't know what it does mean.
But I was trying to look in history to find out what was here before as well. If there was any, because this is like quite a high prominent, although you can't see because of the rest of the houses, this is quite a high point here.
It is.
So you're looking out.
I think it's one of the highest points in Armadale.
Aye, so if you had no houses there, you'd be able to kind of look right out as far as the eye could see. But you've got all the kind of streets and houses and stuff like that. Barville's probably slightly a wee bit more elevated, if not in the same kind of deal. But aye, it was interesting to see kind of what was here. But total, I mean, it's one of the craziest stories I've heard.
Well, I couldn't go back after that incident had happened.
No wonder.
It scared the life out of me. And I'm not easily scared, and I'm a very spiritual person. But that must have happened about...
That would have been, I reckon it was probably like 92 or something. If I'm...
like 25 years ago, something like that.
Roughly about 90, no, what age was that? I would have been about 12. Something like that, so it would have been, it would have been probably 30 odd years ago.
Aye.
So it was, I'm sure it would have been about that. It would have been about, I'm sure in my head I worked it out to about 92, roughly.
Aye, you could be right.
91, 92. But I mean, I just kind of wondered, because if anybody, it's like things like that though, it's like, was that there? Did we take that away as for somebody else, or was something? It's just, I don't know. I mean, I think back to when I was younger. My mum and that used to say that I used to see somebody when I was younger, when I was like below the age of like 4 or 5 or something. Used to see somebody in the room, and that used to totally freak her out. And it also used to describe the same person. It was like
that doesn't surprise me, because children are mere
susceptible to scenes.
They don't have any blockages, and they don't carry the same baggage that adults do. So children can see things that we can't see.
Nah, totally mad story though. But if you've so on for that, is there anything else round about here or that you've encountered or seen?
Only wee things that have happened in here, but they've been spiritual type things, and certainly nothing to do with evil. But that was evil, what happened earlier that day. And I'll never forget that as long as I live. That was how much an impression that it made on me.
Same with me. I mean, just the story, that's why I started this, because of that story. But it was like, it was funny as well, because if you think like with that medium, and all that kind of stuff, and what came out that day, what the medium seen and everything, and my dad and everything, that was a defining moment in my life. That changed my life.
Absolutely.
The whole thing changed my life. I mean, I was out of there, moved,
changed the whole family's life.
Changed the family's life totally just with that one.
That's right.
But that was down to my dad's fault, I mean, for being a total philanderer. But I wouldn't say, but the whole kind of thing in the aspect of what the medium seen that day, or the vibe she got,
was
and
first class.
Aye. It'd be interesting to hear from her again what her take on it was.
I think she might still be alive. In fact, but then she wouldn't know.
No, she didn't know the story afterwards.
No, she didn't. She didn't know the full event. And how to contact her, I would have no idea how to go about that. I mean, as I say, it must be about 30 years, something like that.
It's amazing though. Apart from that, I mean, that's people have these encounters in their houses with things like this. But that was a strange thing where it was like, it started off where you had things where the whole thinking it was a prowler.
Aye.
And then other stuff in the house happening, and like getting grabbed or pinched and things like that. Yeah. It happened to Mum a few times and my sisters and whatever, but all that going on, it's like multi kind of different things happening. And you find that in quite a lot of cases. You even find it in like kind of the do with UFO cases and all that kind of stuff. It's like multi kind of phenomena going on. It's all linked. Yeah.
I think though what happened was it was twofold, because there was that dramatic event, traumatic event really, that was definitely spiritual, right? But it was evil,
a negative,
definitely negative, right? But there was other things that went on as well that were good spiritual things, like, and you seeing things when you were just a young lad, that would not necessarily have been evil.
No.
So there was like, I can see it like in two halves, but it was almost like it was meant to be. That your mum had to find this out, but my God, could have not made it a lot easier on her.
God, I know. Absolutely mad. That is one of the kind of mad stories that I've heard. I mean, it really, really is.
Oh, for sure. I can remember, let me see, Karen, my daughter, she is 45, but she was only 3, I think, and we went on holiday to Scarborough, and we were living in this wee hotel thing, and pretty much up in the attic, that's where we were. And one night I woke and I had the obvious feeling, and I wasn't as spiritual aware as what I am now, right? Being 67, and I think I was only like 25 then, something like that, and aware that somebody was staring at me. So I kind of didn't open my eyes fast. It was a strange thing. It was slowly opened them, and there was this man standing, a solid looking person, right, leaning out of the bed, looking at my face. Now, the only way I can describe this person was, do you know Fagin at the musical Oliver?
Aye.
Oliver Twist. He had long greasy hair, his face was covered in wrinkles and covered in grime, big nose, right? And what he was wearing seemed to be something like the Oliver Twist days, so we're talking like 1820 type thing. Well, I screamed, obviously, right? And the strange thing was, I think I gave him a fright because I could see this look of concern on his face, and he drew back and disappeared. So the next day at breakfast, I was telling this young couple who were at the next breakfast table, and they said, oh, we were nearly coming up to your room when they were coming in late, because your light was still on. I went, oh, I'd be well sleeping. I said, but the reason I had the light on was, and then I was telling her the story. So the lady who owned the hotel, she must have overheard, and she asked me to come and talk to her, and she was not one bit surprised. And then she went on to tell me that there'd also been sightings of like headless horsemen outside, of course, but in their area. So I don't know the history of Scarborough, but obviously the headless horsemen was before it was they were built into hotels and things like that. Yeah. But that again had a big effect on me.
It's understanding over you.
Really. But it was quite remarkable though that he got a fright off of me. It was weird.
That's mad. That's mad. It's mad when you can think of that as like the fear aspect for whatever it was as well.
I had to end up going to see the doctor about it, and she was very good. She didn't laugh at me because a lot of people would, right? And she says, well, don't worry, she says, because he'll no have jumped into the back of the car and came back to Scotland with you, because I was scared even in my own place, and I'd be out in the street and passing people, and I was looking at the faces, and I thought, I'm going to see this man again. I never ever did. So that part was probably just my imagination being overactive.
So what did the woman in the hotel say? Did she seen it before, like personally, or
somebody else had?
The same thing, same person.
The same kind of thing. Absolutely, the same kind of description was given.
It's mad that when you try to think of what the workings behind that is, what it is. I mean, if you think people have got like souls, and if they reincarnate and stuff like that, then you wonder about kind of what the ghost is. Is it somebody trapped or whatever else, or is it energy? Or
can be trapped, and sometimes they need help to go towards the light, kind of thing. But because it's on my journey through this life, I've heard of so many stories about things like that. One in particular that I was kind of involved in a good few years ago, and I'll probably I'll get lost in translation because of my poor memory, right? But a good friend of mine who's really spiritual, he had a spirit come and visit him one night and sat in the bottom of the bed and said, oh, you've got a job to do. There are souls who haven't crossed, and they need energy to do so, right? So there was three of us. There was Billy, my pal, Gordon, and I. We kind of worked together, right? And it needed the three of us. And the spirit that came and told him says, we need the three of you to do it. One or two is not enough. There used to be 3. So and he had to make up this thing. It was like a little wand kind of thing, and he had to encrust it with stones, semi-precious stones, amethyst, garnets in particular, because they are really powerful. And if you know a lot about crystals, it was all crystals, right? So we didn't know where we were going. We didn't know what we had to do. So we set off driving one day, and we were kind of got led a wee bit by spirit, and we ended up in Kirkliston. Now there was a castle there, and for the life of me I can't remember the name of the castle, but it had been destroyed, but a tiny wee bit of this castle was still there. So, but we couldn't find it. So we're driving on this kind of main drag, and we decided to turn up, and it was like fields on either side, and we're going up, like, no, can't be it. So we went up, had a bit of a look around, nothing hit us. So we're driving back down Oyassadnatuk, a sore head, unbelievably sore. Billy felt sick, and Gordon in the back, he started rambling, and it was like a poem, and it was something, I'm sure I've got it written down someplace. It's something about, in the ground there you will find my bones. And a wee chip came up off the road and smacked into the window and didn't crack it, but you know, you get that wee thing. And we realised we need to go back. So as soon as we started going back up that track road, we all felt better. And we got there, and a lot of houses have been built, private houses, like, and we had a feeling we had to go in this direction. So we had to knock on this lady's door and say, look, I hope you don't mind, but is it okay if we kind of wander about? Now how can you explain
that to somebody?
You just can't.
Wonder about your garden, what for? Well,
We said,
look for some bones.
it's a kind of historical thing we're doing. Right, so she's, of course, when you go, and she told us about the castle ruin. Right, so we gets there. Now, hard to visualise this, and I'm not very good at explaining it, but you had to go up this wee incline, grassy incline, right? So Billy gets up, and Gordon gets up, and I'm trying to get up, and it wasn't that steep, right? And all of a sudden, poof, I fell. Or was she pushed? But I didn't think anything of it at the time. And mind me to come back to that point in case I forget, because it's quite important. So we're in, and we get this, the old brickwork of the castle and things like that. And there was this tiny wee arch, like it had been a fireplace at some point, right? And Bill was totally in charge of this. He was the one that was getting on. He was like a beacon. You know, they were channeling through him, right? We were just there to power him up with the energy that we could supply. And he buried this one thing, wrapped it in a cloth, and we buried it under in the soil, right? Why? None of us knew why. The next day, Bill's on the phone to me. He says, "You're never going to believe what's happened." Spirit came back, and it was a Covenanter. Now, I don't know an awful lot about the history of the Covenanters, but they played quite a big part back in the day, and they were quite bad in lots of ways, right? And a lot of these, Bill had been told initially that it was 3 souls that needed to cross over, right? Overnight, there was over 200 souls had crossed over. Powered up by this one thing. I know it sounds totally ridiculous. Or my grandchildren's life. I'm telling the truth. And so these people had crossed, and this was the aim, to get these people to cross. No 200 knots kind of thing, right? And then the next night, Bill got a visitation via another spirit, and it was the spirit of a young lassie, and she was one of the ones who crossed over, and she said, give this to the lady. And it turned out to be a piece of black obsidian, I think was the name of the crystal. But it was carved, it was shaped, right? Now, she didn't bring this to the other side, but she's picked that up on the earth plane, right? She says, give it as a protection. She says, because she did not fall, she was pushed. They were trying to get rid of us. It didn't work. And we were strong enough at this point, spiritually.
So what do you reckon was trying to stop these from doing it?
The evil side. The bad side. Because if you believe in good, there's always the yin and the yang.
Opposite. And
there was, the badness was there, just trying to stop this from happening. And he got lots of messages since then, and we got a feeling of closure. We didn't know what we were going to have to do. We were in the dark. But then I said, no, we were in the light. Right? And it was meant to be. It was one of these things that was meant to be.
It's mad. I mean, it is, like you see, but it's mad to think that, why were these things trapped in the first place? And that. So.
Well, no, everybody. I mean, a lot of them were children.
Right.
Right. You can get the chance to cross over, or you don't. It's up to yourself. There are a lot of ghosts that are trapped earthbound, right? Because they were given the chance to cross over and choose not to, because they were so attached to the earthly plane.
Okay.
Right? And so that's the only explanation that I can give for that. But because they were shown the light and the energy of the crystals and a million other things that we're not aware of.
Oh, totally.
They managed to.
It's interesting really, like the whole, anywhere you figure, quite a lot of places where you get phenomena going on, quite a lot of times you get, like for example, there's a high crystalline in the earth and all that, so you maybe get like stuff like, there's like a heavy quartz area, which has got like a high concentration of quartz or granite, and there's always kind of like strange things happening around about the type of areas. There's always been through history, and you get people trying to like say it's like the piezoelectric effect, right? Because you've got like things where the pressure of the crystals and whatever else they can create like light and all that kind of stuff. But the other kind of places where you tend to find things like where people see like orbs and they see like light phenomena and all that kind of stuff around about these areas. And
there's a lot of power in crystals.
You get a lot of it as well, where there's places where you'll find, let's say for example, a prime example, you've got like Ben McDoo or cairngorms and stuff, you've got high quartz and crystal area. There's been strange stuff happening up there for years with different things. There's been things where you'll get like the big grey man thing, right? You'll have apparitions and all that in that area. There's also things where you'll have, there was a UFO cult at one point, if they're still probably doing stuff, at one of the mountains next to Ben McDoo, up there as well. And then there's another thing over for Ben McDoo as well, there's like another mountain called the Devil's Point, and it used to be called the Devil's Penis. Like they changed the name of it. I mean,
Right.
so like that was called something for a reason. But all the names when you had things where they're called like the Devil's something,
Aye.
it was always for something. It was always some kind of negative connotation towards it. But I don't know. It was like you just always find that there is always phenomena around the crystals. So it's no.
Crystals can be used a lot in healing as well.
Mhm.
The goodness that's in crystals, and a lot of people don't realise they're not just a thing of beauty.
No, that's it. Like, you used to store information and all that kind of stuff.
That's right.
Quartz crystal, and I mean, aye. But aye, interesting. I mean, so have you done anything else? I mean, in terms of
Funny wee things happen. Like if I'm feeling low or troubled, right, it's 99% certain that I will walk through this place and I'll find a 5-pence piece lying someplace. I've found them in any area, but the one that surprised me the most was in the oven. Now, how would a 5-pence piece get in the oven? One in the microwave, you know, things like this. And this is Spirit's way of telling us, look, you may be having a hard time, but we're still here.
I've heard a few instances with that where, and then there was a guy I'd met who had a lot of different UFO experiences right through from childhood right up, and it's funny because he said, like, I didn't really believe in ghosts or poltergeists or nothing like that, because it's funny to think that when I believe in like UFOs and aliens and all that kind of stuff for all the experience I've had over my lifetime, he says, but I never really believed in ghosts or any of that kind of stuff until I met my wife or my missus or whatever. And he says, one of the strange things that happened, this was actually just quite recently, I was talking to him, it was one of the strange things that happened was that we heard like a slap, and it was like a kind of slap on like the linoleum in the floor in the kitchen or something. I think that's what he said at the time, and it was like a coin. I don't know what coin it was, but it was like a coin, and he said it never fell and rolled or anything like that off it. It was like it just kind of slapped down, and it was lying there. And he said it happened a few times. There was a few different times where it's like they actually kind of seen this thing dropping out in the area.
Yep.
And he said it's totally mad to think that. I mean, that it's like it happens. Because this is the because I would never ever believe in anything like that and stuff. But we've seen this happen. And that's what he said. He was mad to think that I believe in all that. But did they believe in this kind of side of it?
Aye.
But aye.
There was one other really interesting story that affects that to do with your family yet again. And it was after your mum had left Armadale. She moved into Penzance.
Penzance.
Silly Isles.
Silly Isles.
And sadly, she died down there. Right. And we went to the funeral, which was held in there. So because it was a long journey, and we had decided to drive, we thought we'd stop halfway. So I can't remember the place that we actually stopped at right enough. It was more than halfway. We were a good bit done, like. And as I'd said earlier, I've got ME, things like that, and even though I just sat in that car all that time and done nothing, I was absolutely exhausted.
It's tired and just travelling.
You know? And that's one of the side effects of ME. So we get sent to the wee hotel room, and I let out a big sigh, and Johnny came out to me, and he, for some strange reason, because he wasn't normally that type of man, gave me a really big hug. So as we're standing there hugging, and it only lasted a few minutes, right? If that, right? My dad, who had crossed over under a year previous to that. He had constantly been on my mind, right? Now this is going to be very hard to believe, and you might find it far-fetched, but again, my grandchildren's lives, right? So we're cuddling. Now, John was taller than my dad and heavier than my dad, and towards the end of his life my dad had lost a lot of weight and he was a ruckly bones, right? All of a sudden John's body turned into my dad's body. I could feel, and then I was scared, but I turned round to look, and as I say, John was taller, my daddy was about the same height as me, and there I could see my daddy's, the back in my daddy's head. His grey hair, I used to cut his hair, you know, things like that, and he had his suit jacket on, and I could smell the Brill cream that my daddy used to wear back in the day, right? It was my dad, 100%, right? And I clung on, because I didn't want to lose that moment. But John pulled away suddenly. I said, "What the hell was that?" I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "I can't explain to you. I can't express how that felt." He says, "But I felt so different."
Sounds mad.
And I told him the story of what had happened, like, and he was a non-believer as well, up until I started to have an influence on him, and then he had seen things for himself that had happened and things like that, and he knew that something special had happened, and I felt so happy. The joy that I felt inside was just like a wave coming over me, and although I still thought about my dad after that, I didn't think about it with the same level of sadness. So I got this visitation for him that I was needing.
It's good when you, I mean, it's like a kind of clarification of the other side or whatever. I mean, it is. So was that about a year after?
My dad had passed about 9 months before your mum had passed, and your mum was sadly only 55 when she had passed.
So it must have been, I reckon it was probably about a year after, roughly about a year after, and I was like, I was going to bed one night, and I had to tell, I don't think I've told a lot of people this. I was going to bed one night, and it's just been I stayed at one of my mates' houses, and before I went to sleep, I can't remember if I turned the light, probably did turn the light off, but I was going to sleep, and before I went to sleep, I heard my mum going, "Christopher," like that, out loud, and I jumped up, and I mean, I wasn't dreaming it. I could hear. That was the last I heard. I mean, that's all I heard. But it was her voice. And it was like the actual noise came from the other side of the room. It wasn't like in my head or next to my ear. It was like if you hear the wall away from maybe like about 3 metres away or whatever. It was like there. And I jumped up and looked. You know what I mean? And that's I don't think I told a lot of people that.
That can happen at any point. Of visitations like that, because once you die, it's your body dies, but your spirit doesn't die, and it's so easy for that spirit to come and visit us.
And it's not as if like time's the same.
No, and on the other side, of course, time doesn't exist.
Totally interesting though. I mean, in that one, as I'm saying, that one, my mum, going back years ago when I must have only been about 22 or something. But it was run about a year after anyway, and I combined it. It was like, it was her saying that, it was kind of like, it wasn't a whisper, but it was like a quiet and kind of voice, but like urgent, saying,
That's lovely,
Christopher,
son. I'm
like
glad you got that.
But aye.
I remember another story as well. After my mum had passed, we were getting organised for the funeral.
Yeah.
And I had got my dad's suit dry cleaned, and instead of just hanging the trousers on the metal wire that you get, I hung it out of they had a really comfy armchair in the bedroom, and so I placed the trousers out of the bedroom. Now, my daddy, he had in the spare room, that's where he kept all his clothes. My mum had such a lot of rubbish, right, enough at times, in the main bedroom they slept in, right? Now the jacket I had put in the bedroom that they slept in this faraway part of the wardrobe where my mum had maybe 2 or 3 big heavy jackets and things like that. So I put it in there so it wouldn't get, because her side, everything was all jam-packed, tight. So the morning of the funeral, Karen, my daughter, she went to get the jacket, and this jacket was just nowhere to be found. And we hunted everywhere. What are we going to do? Right? So methodically I went through all my daddy's wardrobes. No, not there. My mum's, no, not there. I was sitting on the bed and I was thinking, and something came to me to look closer. So I went through my mum's stuff, one by one. Still wasn't there, but something was telling me, look closer. And there, under my mum's big white mohair fluffy cardigan, was my dad's suit jacket. Nobody in their right mind would put a white fluffy cardigan or anything, because it's going to get covered in, right? But there it was. And it was a sign, and to me it was telling me that that was my mum's way of saying, I'm still here for you, Jimmy. Like getting a cuddle for the other side. You know, it was a beautiful thing to have happened.
Well, at least we're starting on maybe the negative point here, and then with the kind of the evil bit, and then ending in the good side.
The good side.
Aye. Hey, well, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time to recount the stories, and
it's been my pleasure. In fact, it's quite surprising to me that Christopher Meek, the wee laddie who used to cut through my garden to try and get to the forest, is sitting on my couch and we're having this kind of discussion. So it's a pure joy to me.
Ah, good. No, I appreciate it. Thanks very much.
You too, son.